When it comes to international travel, safety is always a top priority. The U.S. State Department has a system in place to guide citizens on the risks of traveling abroad, and the highest warning they can issue is a Level 4, Do Not Travel Advisory. These advisories are reserved for countries where extreme conditions like ongoing war, terrorism, civil unrest, or government instability make it too dangerous for U.S. citizens to visit. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the countries currently under a Level 4 warning and why the U.S. government considers them so risky. One, North Korea. Let's start with North Korea, also known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Since 2017, the U.S. government has banned citizens from traveling to North Korea. Why? Well, the risk of arbitrary arrest and long-term detention is extremely high. In North Korea, Americans have been detained for seemingly minor infractions like accidentally leaving a Bible in a hotel or misunderstanding local laws. North Korean authorities don't recognize the diplomatic protections that American citizens are entitled to. This means if you're arrested there, the U.S. government has very little power to negotiate for your release. The tragic case of Otto Warmbier, a U.S. student detained and later returned to the U.S. in a comatose state before passing away, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers Americans face in North Korea. Two, Iran. Next on the list is Iran. While it's a country with a rich history and culture, the U.S. State Department warns citizens against traveling there due to the risk of arbitrary arrest and detention, especially for dual U.S.-Iranian citizens. The U.S. does not have formal diplomatic relations with Iran, and Americans have been detained on dubious charges like espionage or being involved in politically sensitive activities.
There's also the broader geopolitical tension between the U.S. and Iran. With ongoing sanctions and conflicts in the region, any visit to Iran could expose U.S. citizens to a dangerous situation with very limited access to assistance from their own government. Three, Iraq. Iraq has long been a hotspot of conflict, and even though the situation has changed since the peak of the Iraq War, the country still remains a Level 4 country. The U.S. government warns of widespread terrorism, armed conflict, and the risk of kidnapping throughout Iraq. Extremist groups, including ISIS, are still active, and American citizens can become targets simply for their nationality. Even regions that seem stable could quickly turn dangerous due to the unpredictability of the security situation. U.S. personnel in Iraq often face attacks, and the situation can escalate with little notice. For tourists, the risks are simply too high. Four, Afghanistan. Afghanistan remains one of the most dangerous places for U.S. citizens after the Taliban's return to power in 2021. After the U.S. withdrawal from the country, the situation deteriorated quickly. there's widespread violence, terrorism, and political instability. Even humanitarian workers are at risk of kidnappings or attacks. In addition, the US has no embassy in Afghanistan anymore, which means if something were to happen to you, getting help would be extremely difficult. The threat of terrorism is very real, with groups like ISIS-K still carrying out attacks in various parts of the country. Travel to Afghanistan is strongly discouraged because of the extreme danger to life and safety. 5. Syria. Moving on to Syria, this country has been in the midst of a brutal civil war since 2011. This conflict has left much of the country in ruins, and extremist groups like ISIS continue to operate in certain areas. U.S. citizens risk kidnapping, death, or injury from terrorist activities and ongoing military operations. The Syrian government, under President Bashar al-Assad, doesn't always have control over the whole country, and violence can erupt without warning. With most foreign embassies closed, including the U.S. Embassy, Americans traveling in Syria would have no formal help if they run into trouble. It's one of the most dangerous places on the planet for U.S. travelers right now. Six. Libya. Libya is another country torn apart by civil war, and it's been unstable since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The U.S. government advises against traveling to Libya because of high crime rates, civil unrest, and the threat of terrorism. Armed militias control large parts of the country, and kidnapping, especially of foreigners, is a major concern. Terrorist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda also have a presence in the region, making Libya incredibly dangerous for U.S. citizens. Plus, the country's infrastructure is severely damaged, and getting out of the country if something goes wrong could be nearly impossible. In short, it's a war zone, and the U.S. strongly urges citizens to stay away. Seven. Yemen. Yemen is currently facing one of the world's worst humanitarian crises due to an ongoing civil war that began in 2015. The U.S. government has issued a strong "Do Not Travel" advisory for Yemen, primarily due to the active conflict, terrorism, and civil unrest. Yemen is also home to one of the most active branches of Al-Qaeda, which increases the risk of terrorism against foreigners. On top of that, there's a lack of basic services, such as healthcare and food, which makes traveling there even more dangerous. If you're an American in Yemen, not only could you get caught up in the conflict, but you might find yourself without access to life-saving resources. Eight. Somalia. Next is Somalia, a country where the risk of terrorism and piracy is extremely high. Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group linked to Al-Qaeda, controls parts of Somalia and frequently targets both locals and foreigners in deadly attacks. U.S. citizens have been kidnapped in Somalia, and piracy off the coast poses a serious threat to maritime travelers. The U.S. government has a do not travel advisory for Somalia because the central government doesn't have full control over the country, and law enforcement is weak in many areas. If something goes wrong in Somalia, getting help from authorities is almost impossible. Nine, Venezuela. Now, you might not expect Venezuela to be on this list, but the country has been in political and economic turmoil for years. The U.S. State Department warns against traveling to Venezuela due to crime civil unrest and the risk of wrongful detention. The country has one of the highest crime rates in the world, with violent crimes like homicide, armed robbery, and kidnapping common, even in major cities. On top of that, there are severe shortages of food, medicine, and basic supplies, making it difficult for travelers to stay safe. Political tensions between Venezuela and the U.S. have also heightened, putting Americans at greater risk for detention or harassment by local authorities. Myanmar, Burma. Finally, we have Myanmar, Burma, a country in Southeast Asia that has been under a military coup since 2021. The military government has cracked down on dissent, leading to widespread protests and violent clashes. For U.S. citizens, travel to Myanmar is dangerous due to the potential for civil unrest and the arbitrary detention of foreigners. Myanmar has also seen an increase in ethnic conflicts and violent military operations, especially in remote regions. With a lack of accessible services and international support, traveling to Myanmar right now is extremely risky. These Level 4 advisories are issued for a reason: to protect U.S. citizens from life-threatening dangers abroad. If you're thinking about traveling to any of these countries, it's essential to reconsider and prioritize your safety. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, leave a comment below, like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any future updates. Safe travels, and see you in the next video.